Welcome back to the Face of America channel. In the spring of 1789, the United States was a country in name, but not yet in structure. The Constitution had been ratified, the first Congress had convened, and George Washington had taken the oath as the first president. Yet beneath the surface, the nation was dangerously incomplete. There was no federal court system, no national judge, and no unified way to interpret or enforce the laws that Congress was beginning to pass. The young republic had a government, but it had no guardian of justice. Americans understood the stakes. They had just fought a war to escape arbitrary rule, and they were determined never again to live under a system where the law bent to the will of the powerful. The founders knew that liberty without order was chaos, and order without liberty was tyranny. Somewhere between those two extremes, a judiciary had to be built. The question was not whether America needed judges. The question was what kind of judges a free people deserved. When the delegates gathered in Philadelphia in 1787, they entered Independence Hall with the memory of the Revolution still fresh. They remembered British courts that answered to the crown rather than the people. They remembered colonial judges who held office only at the king's pleasure. They remembered trials that were little more than performances, whose verdicts were predetermined, and justice was a luxury. Inside that hall the air was thick with heat and argument. James Madison spoke often of the need for a judiciary that could stand firm against both legislative overreach and executive ambition. Alexander Hamilton, in his sharp, analytical way, insisted that the courts must be independent enough to check the other branches, yet restrained enough to never become lawmakers themselves. He would later write in Federalist No. 78 that the judiciary possessed, quote, neither force nor will, but merely judgment, a phrase that captured the founders' vision of a branch designed to interpret, not to rule. Even the more skeptical delegates agreed that without a national judiciary, the Constitution would be nothing more than parchment. Laws would be passed, but no one could say what they meant. Rights would be declared, but no one could enforce them. Disputes between states would fester. Foreign nations would scoff at a country unable to speak with one legal voice. By the time the convention ended, Article 3 had taken shape. It was brief, elegant, and powerful. It created a Supreme Court and gave Congress the authority to establish lower courts. It laid the foundation for a system that would protect the people from both lawlessness and tyranny. But it did not yet create a single judge. That task would fall to the first Congress. When Congress convened in New York City, the nation's temporary capital, the need for a functioning judiciary became impossible to ignore. Merchants complained that contracts could not be enforced across state lines. Veterans petitioned Congress for relief, only to discover there was no federal court to hear their claims. States quarreled over borders, tariffs, and debts. The Articles of Confederation had left the country with no national court system at all, and the scars of that failure were still visible. Senator Oliver Ellsworth of Connecticut stepped forward with a proposal that would become the Judiciary Act of 1789. It was a masterwork of constitutional craftsmanship. It created a Supreme Court with a Chief Justice and 5 associate justices. It established district courts and circuit courts. It defined the jurisdiction of each level of the judiciary, and it created the office of Attorney General, ensuring that the federal government would have a legal voice in court. Ellsworth argued that justice must be accessible to the people, not hidden behind distant institutions. He believed that a republic could not survive unless its citizens trusted the courts to be fair, impartial, and grounded in the Constitution. When the act passed on September 24, 1789, the United States finally had the structure it needed. What it lacked was a man to lead it. George Washington understood the gravity of the moment. The first Chief Justice would set the tone for the entire judiciary. He would shape the court's authority, its dignity, and its relationship with the other branches. Washington needed someone respected at home and abroad, someone who understood the law, the Constitution, and the delicate balance of power the founders had created. He chose John Jay. Jay was a man of calm intellect and steady character. He had served as president of the Continental Congress, negotiated peace with Britain, and co-authored the Federalist Papers. He was known for his clarity of thought and his unwavering commitment to the rule of law. Washington admired his prudence and his judgment, writing privately that Jay possessed, quote, the talents and integrity which fit him for the station, end quote. On September 26, 1789, the Senate confirmed Jay unanimously. The United States had its first judge. For ordinary Americans, the creation of the judiciary was not an abstract constitutional development. It was a triumph. Farmers, merchants, sailors, widows, and veterans now had a place to seek justice. Contracts could be enforced, disputes could be resolved, rights could be protected. The law was no longer a patchwork of state interpretations, but a unified system grounded in the Constitution. Jay believed deeply that judges were servants of the people. In his First Circuit Court charge, he reminded jurors that the sovereignty of the nation rested not in the government, but in the citizens themselves. Quote, the people, he said, are the sovereign of this country. It was a radical idea in a world still dominated by monarchies, and it became the cornerstone of American justice. The judiciary was designed to be a shield, not a sword. It existed to protect liberty, not to impose ideology. It was meant to be the quiet branch, the steady branch, the branch that kept the nation anchored to its founding principles. Over the next 2 centuries, the judiciary grew in ways the founders never fully anticipated. The Supreme Court claimed the power of judicial review in 1803, allowing it to strike down laws it deemed unconstitutional. As the federal government expanded, so did the reach of federal courts. Entire areas of life that once belonged to states or communities gradually came under federal jurisdiction. By the 21st century, the federal code contained thousands of criminal statutes, many unknown to the average citizen. The courts became increasingly involved in political disputes, social conflicts, and administrative battles. Decisions that once would have been made by legislatures or local communities were now decided by judges. Public trust began to erode. Polls showed confidence in the Supreme Court falling to historic lows. Many Americans felt that justice was no longer blind, but influenced by ideology, status, or political pressure. The judiciary, once the least dangerous branch, now seemed to some like the most unpredictable. In recent years, a new term entered the American vocabulary: lawfare. It described the use of legal processes not merely to enforce the law, but to achieve political ends. Investigations multiplied. Prosecutions became flashpoints. Courtrooms turned into battlegrounds, where political disagreements were fought through indictments, motions, and appeals. Many Americans began to fear that the justice system was being used not as a shield but as a weapon. They worried that political opponents would be targeted, that ordinary citizens could be punished for their beliefs, and that the law was being applied unevenly. Surveys showed a majority of Americans believed the judicial system treated people differently depending on their politics. The sense of fairness that once defined the judiciary was slipping. This was not the world John Jay envisioned. It was not the system the founders designed, and it was not the promise the Constitution made to the American people. The founders foresaw the danger. Thomas Jefferson warned that if judges ever became the ultimate arbiters of the Constitution, the document would become a mere thing of wax. James Madison cautioned that wherever real power accumulated, oppression could follow. They believed that the judiciary must remain tethered to the Constitution and accountable to the people. Their warnings echo across centuries. They remind us that liberty is not self-sustaining. It must be guarded, renewed, and defended by each generation. The path forward is not despair, but restoration. The American judiciary can regain the trust of the people by returning to the principles that guided its creation. Judges must interpret the law rather than create it. Courts must apply justice evenly, without regard to politics or status. The Constitution must remain the standard, not the shifting winds of ideology. The founders built a system strong enough to endure storms, but only if the people remain vigilant. The judiciary belongs to the nation, not to any party or faction. Its purpose is to protect freedom, not to shape society according to the preferences of the powerful. In the architecture of the American Republic, the founders built a judiciary to be independent, but never untouchable. They believed judges must be free from political pressure, yet still accountable to the people whose sovereignty they serve. The balance they struck was delicate. Federal judges would hold office during good behavior, a phrase borrowed from English common law, but the people, acting through their elected representatives, would retain the power to remove any judge who betrayed the public trust. This chapter tells the story of how that mechanism works, why it exists, and how it's been used throughout American history. When the Constitution was drafted in Philadelphia, the delegates understood that lifetime judicial appointments were both a shield and a risk. They protected judges from retaliation from presidents or legislators unhappy with their rulings. But they also created the possibility that a judge might drift into corruption, partisanship, or outright abuse of power. James Madison warned that no branch of government could be left without checks, and the judiciary was no exception. The solution they crafted was impeachment, a process deliberately difficult, deliberately sober, and deliberately rare. The power to remove a federal judge begins in the House of Representatives. Only the House can bring formal charges, known as articles of impeachment. This step is not a conviction. It's the constitutional equivalent of an indictment. The House must decide whether a judge's conduct rises to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors, a phrase that includes not only criminal acts, but also serious abuses of office, corruption, or violations of the public trust. The founders intended this threshold to be high, but not unreachable. A judge who used the bench for personal gain, who accepted bribes, who lied under oath, or who weaponized judicial power for political ends, could be impeached. If the House approves the articles, the process moves to the Senate, where the trial takes place. Senators take an oath to do impartial justice, and the Chief Justice presides if the accused is a Supreme Court justice. Conviction requires a two-thirds vote, a supermajority designed to ensure that removal is never the product of temporary passion or partisan fury. Only when that threshold is met is the judge removed from office. The Constitution allows no appeal. The judgment is final. Although impeachment is the most dramatic tool, it's not the only one. Congress also has the power to reorganize courts, adjust jurisdictions, and even abolish judicial seats entirely, provided it does not target a specific judge by name. This structural authority has been used sparingly, but it remains a reminder that the judiciary, though independent, is not sovereign. The people, through their representatives, retain the ultimate authority to shape the judicial system. History shows that impeachment has been used cautiously. Only a handful of federal judges have ever been removed. Some were caught in bribery schemes. Others falsified documents or abused their authority. One was removed for chronic intoxication on the bench. These cases demonstrate that the mechanism works when genuine misconduct occurs, but they also show the restraint with which Congress has traditionally exercised their power. The founders did not want impeachment to become a weapon against unpopular rulings. They wanted it reserved for true breaches of duty. In recent years, however, the national conversation has shifted. Accusations of rogue judges have become more common, and both political parties have, at times, accused members of the judiciary of overstepping their constitutional role. Some lawmakers argue that judges who engage in what they call judicial activism or judicial lawfare should be held accountable through impeachment. Others warn that using impeachment to punish judicial decisions would undermine the independence of the courts. Even Chief Justice John Roberts has publicly reminded the nation that disagreement with a ruling is not grounds for removal. Yet the founders anticipated this tension. They understood that the judiciary must never become a law unto itself. They also understood that impeachment must never become a tool of political revenge. The balance they created, difficult, slow, and deliberate, was meant to protect both the courts and the people. It ensures that a judge who truly betrays the Constitution can be removed, while preventing the government from toppling judges simply for issuing unpopular decisions. The power to remove a rogue judge is therefore both a shield and a warning. It protects the republic from corruption, and it reminds the judiciary that independence is not the same as immunity. Judges hold their authority only as long as they honor the Constitution and the people it serves. When they stray from that duty, when they abandon impartiality, integrity, or the rule of law, the mechanism for removal stands ready, not as a political weapon, but as a constitutional safeguard. In this way, the founders ensured that the judiciary would remain what they intended it to be, a guardian of liberty, not a master of the people. The power to remove a judge is the final expression of that principle. It is the people's reminder that even the highest robe in the land is still accountable to the sovereign citizens of the United States. When John Jay took his oath in 1789, he believed he was helping build a country where justice would be accessible, impartial, and grounded in the will of the people. He believed that judges were guardians of liberty, not instruments of power. His vision remains a beacon for a nation still striving to live up to its founding ideals. The story of America's first judge is not just a chapter in history. It's a reminder of who we are, what we stand for, and what we must protect. It's a call to preserve the integrity of the judiciary, to defend the Constitution, and to ensure that justice remains the birthright of every American.
Face of America, hear our call. United we stand, together we'll rise tall. From the mountains to the shining sea, history's heartbeat, proud and free. Stories of courage, love and might. In our hearts we find the light. From the past we draw our strength. Face of America, we go the length. Together we share, together we shine. Every corner our spirits entwine, building a future hand in hand. Face of America, and I would be the stand. Together we shine, together we shine. In every quarter life, spirits entwined. Loving a future, hand in hand. Face of ungovernable every corner song. Hey, many then join, bring that and we stand.